Here's a section. Again, this is optional reading, but I highly suggest it. It will help you better understand tomorrow's lesson. So we're going to read it, and I'm going to encourage you to annotate it to the best of your ability. I will stop and suggest notes to you. It begins. Exchanges. Columbus's famed voyage in 1492 joined two very different worlds. For thousands of years, Europeans and Native Americans lived completely separate lives, unaware of the other's existence. When Columbus stepped onto the rocky soil of San Salvador, he started a historic chain of events that affected the lives of millions of people on both sides of the Atlantic. Columbus and later explorers discovered a land unlike anything they had experienced. They encountered neatly patterned park-like settings in the middle of massive forests, caused by Native Americans burning and clearing out large areas of the forest to enhance their hunting efforts. The Spanish explorers saw strange creatures, including turkeys, llamas, iguanas, and rattlesnakes, which they colorfully described as snakes with castanets. Although they recognized the dog, they never imagined that anacondas, vampire bats, electric eels, or armadillos existed. The Old World explorers also enjoyed new plants and foods, including tobacco, tomatoes, potatoes, corn, squash, beans, peanuts, pineapples, and chocolate. So in this one, we're talking about Old World versus New World. So when we talk about Old World, that's Europe. When we talk about New World, that's the Americas. So make sure we're clearly painting those images. Old World, Europe, New World, Americas. It continues. In return, Columbus and subsequent European travelers introduced the Americas to many Old World foods and animals. Ships filled with cattle, sheep, pigs, and horses, were dispatched to the Caribbean islands, and settlers planted wheat, sugarcane, peaches, bananas, and coffee. These crops thrived in the warm, sunny climate of the Spanish colonies. Other vegetation, including dandelions, clover, and Kentucky bluegrass, were also brought to the New World, most likely mixed with different seeds. So those are kind of invasive species making their way over unintentionally from the Old World to the New. The exchange of plants and animals were generally well received by people of both worlds. The Indians of Western North America, for example, quickly incorporated the horse into their culture. They enhanced their proficiency as buffalo hunters and warriors. Many of the new crops became staples in the diets of the people of the New World, and eventually provided a dependable source of income for the European settlers. In the Old World, new foods, especially potatoes, helped feed a rapidly growing population. The European explorers also took advantage of several Native American creations, including canoes, snowshoes, moccasins, and hammocks. And new words, among them teepee, skunk, moose, tomahawk, and chipmunk, were adopted into the European languages. So we see a lot of exchange of ideas, words, food. We start using elements of language on both sides. Naturally, not all exchanges between the two worlds were positive. European voyagers brought with them pathogens that caused smallpox, measles, whooping cough, influenza, scarlet fever, and diphtheria. Outbreaks of smallpox and measles, in particular, often wiped out entire villages since Native Americans did not have the antibodies to fight the deadly germs. Frequently, the diseases killed or incapacitated so many Indians they could not adequately defend their lands from the European invaders arrived. It is estimated that half the Aztec population died of smallpox during the Spanish conquest of Mexico. Ultimately, perhaps close to 90% of Native Americans died after becoming infected with Old World diseases. Entire civilizations were eradicated with no descendants to carry on their unique cultures or philosophies. Although the Indians suffered more fatalities, European citizens did not entirely escape the threat of new disease. Many travelers who crossed the Atlantic contracted syphilis from the Native Americans and spread it through the European civilization. The exchange of animals, plants, and diseases thereby transformed both American and European cultures with distinctly mixed results. Spanish explorers. Columbus's return from the New World created an abundance of activity throughout Europe. Old World monarchs dispatched explorers and small armies to the newly discovered continent to establish outposts, spread religious beliefs, and seek treasure. The advanced Indian civilization of South and Central America were prime targets for invasion because of their abundance of gold and silver. As Spain and Portugal battled for legal rights in the New World, Pope Alexander VI, a Spaniard, mediated a compromise that divided the non-Christian world between the two powers. The Treaty of Tordesillas drew an imaginary line from the Arctic Pole to the Antarctic Pole, 100 leagues west of the Cape Verde Islands, which are located west of the African coastline. The decision gave Spain the right to anything west of the line and the opportunity to explore and settle the known New World. Brazil, however, though part of the New World, was settled by the Portuguese because it was on the eastern side of the treaty line. Within a decade after Columbus's landfall, thousands of Spanish conquistadors, explorers, and settlers ventured across the southern portion of present-day United States through Mexico and southward into Peru. The conquistadors were typically professional soldiers and sailors, recruited to fight for church and crown. However, many noble peasants and members of the middle class also joined the excursions in search of adventure and wealth. The lust for gold was a common motivator that sometimes drove the explorers to perform heinous acts against the Native Americans. Military conquest, diseases, slavery, and deceit broke the Indians' resistance, while Indian allies, superior weapons, and horses provided conquistadors the strength and mobility to control vast populations. The first known European explorer to set foot on what became the United States was Juan Ponce de Leon. In 1493, the Spanish explorer accompanied Christopher Columbus on his second voyage to America. As a reward for his assistance in suppressing Indian revolts, Ponce de Leon was named governor of present-day Puerto Rico. After subjugating the Indians on Puerto Rico and amassing a fortune of gold and slaves, he was replaced as governor. Free to dedicate his attention to exploration, Ponce de Leon set out to find the fabled island of Bimini. He was driven to discover new lands, gold, slaves, and possibly the legendary Fountain of Youth. Many people believed that those who drank from the fountain would be cured of all illnesses and their youthful appearance would be restored. Ponce de Leon sailed northwest from Puerto Rico until he reached Florida. He followed the coastline south, rounded the peninsula, and explored much of Florida's west coast. The King of Spain honored Ponce de Leon with a knighthood and named him governor of Florida. He was unable to mount a second expedition until 1521, when an attempt was made to colonize Florida. However, the natives no longer passively accepted Spanish domination, and Ponce de Leon was mortally wounded during an Indian attack. He discovered neither great wealth nor the Fountain of Youth, and failed to establish a permanent settlement in Florida. In 1540, another Spanish explorer, Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, began a trek through what is now the southwestern United States in search of the fabled treasure of the seven cities of Cibola. The expedition consisted of several hundred Spaniards, some African slaves, and about 1,000 Indian allies. They discovered the Grand Canyon and the adobe pueblos of the Zuni in New Mexico. They were later determined to be the source of Cibola legend. Coronado pushed as far north as the plains of Kansas, where vast herds of buffalo roamed, but he never found gold, silver, or other riches, and returned to Mexico City. Although his journeys familiarized the Spanish with the Pueblo people and the geography of the American Southwest, Coronado was considered a failure because he did not bring back the fabled riches of Cibola. During the same period that Coronado ventured through the Southwest, Hernando de Soto landed in Florida and explored the southeastern portion of the present-day United States. His party included more than 600 soldiers with armor, about half of them mounted on horseback, and was considered to be the best equipped expedition yet in the New World. De Soto traveled through Florida, into the Carolinas, and westward through the Mississippi River, where he became the first European to view the Father of Waters. Disappointed by the lack of riches in the small Indian villages they encountered, the Spanish typically attacked the natives and burned their villages. In May of 1542, De Soto was stricken with a fever and died near Natchez. About half of the expedition ultimately returned to Mexico empty-handed and dressed in rags and skins. After a 4-year ordeal, in 1542, Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo led an expedition to explore the western coast of California. As a young conquistador, he served in the Spanish army and helped Hernan Cortez conquer the Aztecs. Cabrillo's experience as an explorer prompted the Viceroy of New Spain to select him to lead the exploration of the Pacific coastline as far north as the San Francisco Bay. Although he died during the journey, Cabrillo established the Spanish claim to California. The Spanish explorations opened the New World to European settlers. Hundreds of new villages were established throughout the United States, primarily in the south from Florida through Texas and into California. Some Spaniards took control of existing Indian villages as encomienderos through the Spanish system called encomienda. Favored officers were given land and ownership of one or more Indian villages. The encomienderos, they served as protectors, but also used the natives as laborers, forced laborers. The Spanish control of the New World spread across the land. So did the rumors of the conquistadors' cruel behavior towards the Indians. In an effort to protect the natives and changes in the action of the Spanish explorers, Bartholomew de las Casas, a Dominican priest, documented the questionable behavior in a brief relation of the destruction of the Indies. Although the literature prompted Spanish leaders to some reforms, it also started the black legend of the Spanish cruelty that labeled the Spanish as vicious, inhumane beings who slaughtered thousands of Indians and enslaved warriors. Although the black legend damaged Spain's reputation, the Spanish Empire in America continued to grow. Spanish culture, laws, religion, and language gradually blended with those of the Indians and African slaves to form new communities and traditions. Spain had most of the New World to itself for about a century before other European nations began serious efforts to establish their own American colonies.